On behalf of the Connecticut trial lawyers, it's my privilege to present the Judicial Award this year to Judge Thomas Nadeau. Judge Nadeau grew up in a small working-class family in Watertown, Connecticut. His father worked for the same factory in Waterbury for 44 years. His mom was a stay-at-home mom until the age of 50 when she decided to get her license so she could get a part-time job in order to earn some additional income for the family. Judge Nadeau attended public high school where he played baseball. He went on to the University of Connecticut. He played baseball there as well. And it was at UConn that he had the opportunity to hear John F. Kennedy speak. He became captivated with this man and what he stood for, and he even memorized the inaugural address that John F. Kennedy gave on a frigid morning in January of 1961. It is fortunate for all of us that Judge Nadeau, under the mistaken belief that John F. Kennedy was a lawyer, decided that he too wanted to go to law school. So he made that decision that eventually that was something that he wanted to do. But he attended the University of Connecticut in the early 1960s. This was during the Vietnam War, and he entered UConn on an ROTC program. And although he graduated in 1963, he didn't enter the military until 1964. And during that year in between, he decided to take a bit of a break, so that half the year he spent it as a ski bum in Vermont, and the second half of the year he spent it as an ID checker, aka bouncer, in Hyannis. He entered the military for 2 years, during which time he applied to and was accepted at the prestigious Georgetown Law School. And perhaps it was the fact that he was a little bit older than his classmates at Georgetown, or the fact that he had a different life experience, being only one of 2 GIs in that class. But suffice it to say that Judge Nadeau in law school took quite well. He excelled there. He was a known personality on campus. He was on law review. He was the research director for the executive board of that law review. And when he graduated, it was pretty obvious that he was going to have a lot of job opportunities. And he actually almost took a very interesting job opportunity on Wall Street in a very well-known firm. But perhaps he still felt some fondness for his home state of Connecticut, and he decided that he was going to apply for a Supreme Court clerkship. So he came up on Christmas break and was interviewed. I guess at that time the Supreme Court would interview their applicants en banc, so he was interviewed by all the justices at the same time. And he was the first draft choice of Justice Howard Alcorn. He served that clerkship and then immediately went into a brief stint at the Senate campaign race of Joseph Duffy. And then he began his first real job, his first legal job, at the then law firm of Koskoff, Rutkin, and Beater. And I understand from some colleagues there that I spoke to that it was just as if Judge Nadeau just showed up one day in a 1953 Chevy that he had purchased for $200 in law school. This was a vehicle that probably should have lasted him only 5 months, but for some reason lasted him 5 years. And I understand that it was a kind of situation where you'd open the door and like baseballs would fall out and some clothes would fall out and papers would fall out. And some of his colleagues thought that he might have been living in that vehicle. So perhaps this was the precursor to his love of classic cars. I don't know, he can tell you that, but that car seemed to serve him well. He was at the Koskoff, Beater law firm for over 20 years, and he had the opportunity to practice extensively with legendary Ted Koskoff. He had many amazing cases. He may talk to you about some of them, but his first federal criminal trial, he represented none other than F. Lee Bailey. He also was part of the Sponge Factory arson case. This was the biggest arson investigation ever put forth by the FBI. And his colleagues tell me that it was obvious to them that he always loved the law. He would investigate each case to the nth degree and would leave no stone unturned. In 1994, Judge Nadeau was appointed to the bench at the Superior Court, and he has served throughout the state. And it's as a trial judge, I should say, that we honor him tonight. I'd like to share with you a story. It's not my story, but it's a story of one of the first experiences that the judge had on the bench, or so I am told this. It was a busy day in the GA in Norwalk. Defense attorneys were busy conferring with their clients. The prosecutor was going through his busy docket. And there came a time when the case of State versus Dr. Smith, an eye doctor, was called. A well-respected defense attorney appeared on behalf of Dr. Smith and began to explain that his client was seeking accelerated rehabilitation on an assault charge. As the story went, Dr. Smith was attending his son's soccer match, and an errant ball went off the field and struck Dr. Smith, he took the ball and he threw it back on the field. And in doing so, he struck another young soccer player. He was very sorry that he had done this, and the young boy wasn't hurt. But another parent, another spectator, came over to Dr. Smith and admonished him for his bad behavior. Dr. Smith became increasingly angry at being challenged in this fashion. And in an angry moment, he grabbed the glasses off the spectator, crunched them up in his hands, threw them on the ground, and stomped on them. The spectator was also represented by a well-respected counsel, and he was opposing the application for accelerated rehabilitation because he felt that Dr. Smith should be duly punished for this assault. During this entire time, the courtroom was quiet, very unusual for the GA, and the judge behind the bench was sitting, listening very intently to the arguments. And when all was said and done, the judge looked up at both the defendant and the victim and said, "Well, I guess that's how us old guys fight nowadays." He then granted the doctor accelerated rehabilitation and ordered him to do free eye exams for a period of time. And this story, I think, just gives us a perspective that Judge Nadeau can always keep it real and can always keep his perspective when he is ruling on cases.